Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Really interesting segment today. We're going to talk about three players that we each think the Giants should completely stay away from in the 2021 NFL Draft, in the first round specifically. Three players who, if they took, we'd be like, what the hell are you doing? Mark Ross over here is mocking Gregory Russo still to the Giants at 11 a couple days ago, and he's actually projected to drop to the second round at this point. The guy's stock is just plummeting based on his kind of positionless nature. If you look at him, it's hard to really figure out where he's going to fit at the NFL level. And we're going to talk about Gregory Russo as the first one on the list, just because his fit with the Giants doesn't really make sense, and we're kind of curious as to what each other think about why Gregory Russo is a guy we should kind of stay away from in the first round, maybe the second if he dropped, but first round for the most part, kind of avoiding him. But before we dive into that, Anthony, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing real good, and it's interesting enough that we're talking about a few prospects here that I'm kind of a big fan of almost all of them. I really like them. It's just I would stay away if I were the Giants, right? So that's when we talk about these prospects, we're talking from the Giants perspective, from the perspective of a Giants fan or mock general manager for the Giants, right? Because we're going to mention some names of some players that you guys probably know that I'm pretty high on, but we're going to get into some scheme-specific things, some needs-specific things, what the Giants need, what they're looking for versus what they already have. And that's why a lot of these guys we're going to say don't necessarily make sense for the New York Giants, and that's why we want them to stay away. But it's going to be an interesting discussion. I think this is a really talented draft class. We're only 11 days or 10 days away from the draft. I can't wait. I'm as excited as I can be, and I'm excited to do a couple live streams between now and then. It's going to be a lot of fun, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, so let's jump into Gregory Russo, guys. I know everyone's kind of off the Gregory Russo train at this point. He's been mocked to the Giants a couple times in the past. Mark Ross, who still seems to be on crack, still has him going to the Giants a couple days ago at 11. And, why is he dropping? After his pro day, which was pretty poor, didn't blow any minds, this stock started to tumble, and then people start to realize his production was very much based on an interior coverage sack basis. He doesn't have that flexibility, that bend on the outside. He played safety and linebacker, or rather safety and wide receiver in high school, but at the college level he transitioned to defense. He doesn't have that much experience as an interior defender, because they didn't really know how to figure him out. He's a very unicorn type of player. How do you figure out how to use a guy that doesn't have great bend? He somehow manages to get in the backfield from a 3 tech position, but he doesn't really fit the molds, the build of an interior pass rusher at the NFL level. You want somebody like a Quiddy Pay, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, and like a Quiddy Pay who's stronger, strong hands, can seal the edge against the run. He can stop the run in the interior for running inside zone. Gregory Russo, it doesn't strike me as a physically imposing player. He's tall, kind of has some size to him, probably some room to grow. But for the most part, I don't really see him as this physically imposing player. I think he's a little lanky. Ideally, I think his mold actually looks more like an outside linebacker. He kind of has a Lorenzo Carter build, which is why him as an interior guy kind of confuses me, because if you put Lorenzo Carter interior at 3 or 5, not 5 tech, but rather 3 tech or 0 tech, he would get absolutely bulldozed. You want those guys to be on the outside. So I think that Gregory Russo actually might end up making the transition to 5 or outside linebacker. That's kind of how I feel about him, which I think would fit the Giants. But I'm not taking a flyer on a player who they need to develop. He's not ready to play at 11. He's not going to make an impact day one, in my opinion. Maybe he would start, but I don't think he's racking up double-digit sacks anytime soon. And he needs to learn a new position if they're going to make that transition. So I don't think the Giants should go that route based on those reasons. And for that reason, I'm out.
Yeah, see, with Gregory Russo, I'm not super low on him. I'm just not high enough on him to say I want him in the first round in general. I think that Gregory Russo, you got to keep this in mind. I'm going to play a little bit devil's advocate and advocate for Gregory Russo here. He was a sophomore. He was a young kid when he had 15 and a half sacks in his sophomore season with Miami. And everyone was saying, wow, this kid's pretty good. We need to see him grow one more year and see if he can put together the tools and fix these weaknesses that we see in his game in his next season so that he can solidify himself as a top 10 pick. That's what people were saying about Gregory Russo last year. So now everyone's watching the film thinking that they're going to look at this top 10 talent. Everyone's looking at this film and saying, I don't see that at all. I see a very raw, underdeveloped, unpolished, not super physically gifted pass rusher. That's the problem, right? If he didn't opt out this season, he had all this hype going for him. The way that the forecast was, it probably was the right idea at the time for him to opt out because he looked like a top 10 pick. But he looked like a top 10 pick based on we assumed he would get better this following season. We never got to see him play this following season, so we didn't see him get better. We saw all these weaknesses on his film, and we kept studying it, dissecting it, and now we just see them more and more and more, and we're saying this is not a top 10 pick. I got to play a little bit devil's advocate and say if he had this 2020 season and played it, he'd probably be a first-round pick for sure and a top 10 pick because he probably would have fixed all these things and learned from these mistakes and grown as a player and developed more. We didn't get to see him do it, so that's kind of where the risk comes into play with Gregory Russo. He's a talented player. It's kind of hard to figure out where he fits in an NFL scheme. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But he is a talented player. He would have been a lock first-round talent, but we just have too many question marks about him. There are so many question marks, and we didn't get to see him play this year to try and answer some of those questions. And that's my big problem with Gregory Russo. We saw him get a lot of his sacks from the zero-tech alignment, which was kind of fancy, right? Having this guy who's an edge rusher line up over the zero-tech and do some extra pass rushing things. Question mark. Can he do that in the NFL? Can he line up at zero tech and get to the quarterback? Question mark. Is he strong enough, large enough, fat enough to play on the interior? Doesn't look like it, and it doesn't look like he put on the weight and size to play on the interior either, unless you're talking about the three tech. For me, the question mark of where will he line up in the NFL, the answer is five tech. Now for the New York Giants, the edge rushing position is not a five tech, it is a stand-up outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense. So, where do you fit Gregory Russo in that scheme? Are you saying he's your nickel rotational pass rusher 5-tech? Well, you're not spending the 11th overall pick on your rotational 5-tech. And I honestly think the Giants just got their pretty good rotational nickel 5-tech with with Afadi Odenigbo. We just interviewed him. He's a phenomenal talent, and he's really actually excited to start rushing out of the 2-point stance, standing up as outside linebacker. But he has all this experience in the 4-point stance as a 5-tech, and I think that's already, you've got your 5-tech on the roster with Afadi. So when you're talking about Gregory Russo and you're saying this guy looks like a 5-tech in the NFL, that's me saying I think he fits better on a team with a 4-3 defense, not with the Giants who run a base 3-4, and I think that's the problem that we face when we talk about Gregory Russo to the Giants. Now, if you're talking about he falls to us in the second round, I'm saying, okay, I'm listening. I'm not saying I necessarily want to do it, but I'm listening because I think him in the second round is decent value because he does still have those tools. We saw a lot of production from him in college. We just have all these question marks. He isn't a bendy player, but he does have some decent functional strength and power, and he has a good knack for getting to the quarterback, which are good traits. We didn't get to see him develop those traits and grow into a more complete player. Maybe he can do that in the NFL with proper coaching, but I'm not taking that risk in the first round. That's my thing. Maybe back end of the first round, they trade back up, but he's a second round target for me. Anyone who wants him in the first round, I think you're crazy, and there's no way that I can get on board with that. So that's why I'm saying stay away from Gregory Russo with the 11th overall pick.
Yeah, he's another guy that really just doesn't fit our scheme. And this is what an NFL scout said. He pretty much is in line with what you just detailed. He says, I don't really see a big-time NFL rusher. So much of his pressure came as a zero technique, and he won't see those looks in our league. He has very average juice and speed to power. You know, when he's going up against, stronger guys, he takes on a lot more than he gives out. He's not a absolutely strong guy. I think he has room to grow in terms of his build and frame. I think he has some muscle mass he can add to it. But again, he has very, very, very little experience as a 5-tech. And again, that wouldn't even fit the Giants scheme unless he's literally coming on in nickel and dime packages. So I really don't see him as a fit for the Giants. I would stay away from him completely. And as a zero tech, look at him compared to Dalvin Tomlinson. The Giants utilize those big zero techs to soak up double teams and fill the A gaps to stop the run. Gregory Russo is going to get absolutely mauled by double teams, and he's going to get absolutely mauled against guards against the run if he's trying to fill an A gap. They're just bigger than him. They have lower center of gravity. They're just going to push him to the second level, and there's going to be wide open gaps. He can't play zero tech in the NFL. And he has very little experience at 5-tech. He's an athletic upside player who I think actually ends up dropping to the second round because most teams are going to look at him and say, you don't have experience with what we're looking for. There is a ton of other players, and even in pass rushers at that matter. I would go with Jalen Smith. I would go with Azeez Ojulari. I would go with Quiddy Pay way before him, and there's a couple more on there too that probably would go before him. So that's the spiel on Gregory Russo and why kind of we should stay away from him.
One more thing I'll throw in there, though. With him lining up at zero tech, a lot of the times he was lining up at zero tech and they were running stunts and twists, and then he was ending up on the edge. But the problem is, you look at that and you kind of see red flag because he's playing that zero tech and then sweeping out to the side. That's kind of saying he doesn't have the burst and get off on the edge to just do it. He needs like this head start as he loops around with a distraction, taking advantage of a matchup. You're not going to get those looks as frequently in the NFL. Plus, you're going against much smarter offensive linemen who know how to defend against that thing. So that's why advocation a little bit. I don't think he's ever been planning to play zero tech, and he was never asked to run the defend from that spot. But I just don't see it even working out in the NFL with those stunts and twists in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So the second one on my list is Quiddy Pay in terms of not being a great fit for the Giants. I know Anthony might have a different opinion on this one, but Quiddy Pay, in my opinion, also is a guy that doesn't really fit our scheme. He's better as a 5-tech in a 4-3, down edge rusher type of 4-point stance guy. And the Giants really aren't going to use him as much as they would use an outside linebacker like Azeez Ojulari, who translates, or Joseph Asai, who actually will translate to OLB at the next level. I just don't see him as an outside linebacker. I think he's like a Fadi Adenabo. That's kind of the style he is. You made a great comparison. He's like Jadeveon Clowney. He is more of a run stopper, stealing the edge kind of guy, but he's not going to rush the passer at a high level. But maybe he will. We don't know that. He potentially could become a fantastic edge rusher out of Michigan. And he is a great player. He has really, really great strength, extremely strong hands. He's a bulldozer. He is fantastic on the bull rushes, but for the most part, he just doesn't fit our scheme again. So are you going to only put him in for 40, 50% of your snaps? We need a guy that can play 70 to 90% of our snaps right now. That's going to make an impact to 11, especially with 4 to 5 quarterbacks going off the board in the top 10 picks. There's going to be 5 to 6 non-QBs that drop to 11. One of those guys will, and you're going to get an insane value that, can make an impact day one. Like Michael Parsons would play 90%, 95% of our snaps, maybe more. So, that's kind of where I'm going with this is if you're not going to be on the field for 70 to 90% of those snaps, it's not worth taking them at 11 unless you project that you're going to be changing your entire defensive scheme. But for the most part, Patrick Graham just signed another 2-year extension to be with the Giants. He's also the assistant head coach and one of their lead scouts. He's not going anywhere. This defense is staying the same. It's staying at 3-4. They're not going to change everything up in year 2. It wouldn't make much sense. So I think Quiddy Pay, another guy who doesn't fit our mold. I love him as a prospect. I think he's going to have a great career with somebody else. But just for our scheme, I don't see him as a great fit for us.
Okay, so personally, I don't necessarily see him as a terrible scheme fit. I watched his game against Penn State, and he actually took quite a few snaps on the edge as an outside linebacker rushing out of that 2-point stance, and I came away fairly impressed. The reason I don't think he's a fit with the Giants is not necessarily scheme-dependent in terms of where he... And you know what? I think you're right. He is more of a 5-tech. I think that's where he ends up thriving in his NFL career. I think the perfect place for him to have gone if they didn't just sign Jadeveon Clowney was the Cleveland Browns, because he can play that 5-tech, develop as a pass rusher, but the strength of Quiddy Pay is his run defense. He's an excellent run defending edge rusher. And funny enough, I think my pro comparison for him is Jadeveon Clowney. Because you look at Jadeveon Clowney, he's not a 10-sack-a-year guy, but he's still an elite edge rusher in the NFL because he's an elite run defender. He's a run defending edge rusher, which the Giants don't necessarily need right now. That's why I think he doesn't fit with the Giants. Their need is for a speed rusher, a pass rusher off the edge. The Giants don't necessarily need a run-defending edge rusher right now, and I think that's what Quiddy Pay is. The Giants don't need a Jadeveon Clowney. That's why they never really were that interested and didn't try to sign him, because Jadeveon Clowney brings you elite run defense. He doesn't bring you elite pass rush. The Giants are looking for elite pass rush right now. So I think that's why you look at Quiddy Pay and you kind of say, maybe not a fit with the Giants based on what they need versus what they have. Now, I think Quiddy Pay, like you said, is a great prospect who's going to have a phenomenal NFL career. I think he's going to have a great NFL career where I don't necessarily see him reaching 10 sacks in a season, but I do see him reaching 15 tackles for losses as he keeps stuffing the run and setting the edge and being a great elite run-defending edge rusher. That's what I see from Quiddy Pay. Again, that's why my pro comp for him actually is Jadeveon Clowney. I think their playing styles are very similar. But I just don't think that the Giants are looking for a Jadeveon Clowney prototype. I don't think they're looking for a run-defending edge rusher. So I think they're better off, if they're going edge rusher in round 1, going with one of the guys who is a pure pass rusher, like an Azeez Ojulari, like a Jalen Phillips. So I agree. I think the Giants should stay away from Quiddy Pay based on what they need out of an edge rusher.
Yeah, I mean, look, this edge rusher class is weak. Very, very, very weak. Otherwise, they'd be going in the top 5, top 10 picks. So I don't think there's any pass rusher that's going to go in the top 10 picks this year. Maybe even not the top 15 at this rate, because I don't want the Giants to be going and reaching for a pass rusher because they need one. You know what I mean? I feel like you could probably wait until the second round and get similar production from some of the guys in the first round. Maybe Jalen Phillips and Azeez Ojulari are the exceptions there. But I think I love a guy like Joseph Asai, who's going to be an outside linebacker day one, a little bit raw, but he has athletic upside. He's had some really clutch moments with Texas. I like him a lot. But for the most part, you don't want to reach when you have an opportunity to take an elite playmaker who's going to play 90% of snaps and actually make a significant impact day one. Whereas Russo, Quiddy Pay, even Ojulari, you really don't know what they're going to produce year one. They could end up being, stashed behind Lorenzo Carter, Ocean Ximenez. We don't know what will happen. I doubt that would happen, but you never know with guys that really don't have a ton of tape, a ton of experience. Maybe even opted out of last year. I think Azeez Ojulari is the only one I could justify taking at 11. Maybe Jalen Phillips with his concussion history kind of scares me. But let's transition over to another grouping of players, the cornerbacks. And we've heard a couple rumors the past couple days. Patrick Surtain out of Alabama was one of them, a guy who's been connected to the Giants. I don't think the Giants will go that route based on the 3-year, $39 million deal we offered Dory Jackson, and we still have Darnay Holmes. I could see them drafting Surtain and putting him in the slot to start his career, and then transitioning him outside to the boundary, which is where they project him to be. But it's not Surtain who I'd stay away from. It's Virginia Tech corner Caleb Farley. Anthony and I have differing opinions on this one. Caleb Farley is an unbelievable talent with increasingly high upside, but the guy is so injury prone, and I do not like injury prone players, especially guys coming off of back surgery, and he had to miss his pro day because of it. Caleb Farley's had a torn ACL. He's had knee issues, ankle issues. He's a transitioned receiver, I think, going over to corner. So, he has not much experience at cornerback. He could even drop to the second round, is what they're saying now. Another guy who was mocked to the Giants at 11 a couple months ago. Dropping draft stock, not enough game film. He's predominantly only played on the left side of the line of scrimmage, so he doesn't have much flexibility when moving around the field. He really never played in the slot at all. So that's kind of a concern. You couldn't put him in the slot and hope for him to do well there and then transition. He's really a pure boundary corner with his speed. I think that's where he's going to thrive if he gets that opportunity, and he will. But for the most part, he's another guy I'd stay away from. The injuries scare me in the first round. Not a lot of people have him going to the Giants regardless, so it doesn't really matter. But he's a guy that just a little bit too much on the injury side for me, and that's my biggest flaw when it comes to Caleb Farley. What do you think, Anthony?
I love Caleb Farley. You know that. I'm really high on him. He was my CB1 when we had that film breakdown of Patrick Surtain, and we had, discussion, CB1. Is it Farley? Is it Surtain? I've always been the Caleb Farley guy. I've always had him as my CB1, and if it wasn't for this back surgery that he just had, he still would be. Now I'm not so sure. Now I think he is CB3. I think you got to put him behind Surtain, and you got to put him behind even J.C. Horn, and, I think a lot of people have him as CB4, even behind the Northwestern kid Newsome as well. So Caleb Farley's back surgery is a very serious red flag. A lot of people come into the leagues with bad backs, I think, and a bad back doesn't really ever heal, right? If you have a bad back, you kind of have a bad back for life, and that's the problem there. That's the big fear, because it's a back injury. That's as serious as can be. But I'm not necessarily going to agree with Alex and say I want to stay away from Caleb Farley. Caleb Farley was, previously projected to be a top 10 pick, maybe 11. Maybe he would go to the Giants. That back surgery has dropped him to the back end of the first round, or maybe even an early second round pick. If he's somehow sitting on the board at 42 for the Giants, I am 100% taking the chance on him. I'm taking him at 42, and I'm saying this is a guy who I think could be a top 5 cornerback in the NFL if he stays healthy. Now, he might not stay healthy, but that's why I'm taking him in the second round, because I'm not as scared of my second round pick busting as I am with my first round pick, right? So I'm taking the chance on him in round 2 if he's there. But I understand completely if someone has him off of their draft board entirely, just because that back injury is scary. A lot of people, backs just don't recover right, and that's a scary thing with Caleb Farley. I think he's an immensely talented player with all of the upside in the world to be the top cornerback in the NFL if he can put it all together, put those tools together, learn that technique properly, and stay healthy. But staying healthy is a huge question mark. So I agree with Alex. I totally respect the opinion if you completely have him off your draft board. But me personally, I'm willing to take the chance if he's there in round 2. Personally, I think he ends up going within the final 10 picks of the first round. I think he ends up being a first round pick. Someone's going to look at his talent, look at that upside, and say if he stays healthy, he's going to be a star, and they're going to take a chance on him at the back end of the first round. Personally, that's how I feel. But if they don't, if I'm wrong about that and he's there in round 2 for the Giants to take, I'm taking that chance personally. I'm not staying away from him. I'm only staying away from him in the first 25 picks of the draft, because then after that, I think you can do it comfortably. So that's how I feel about Caleb Farley. I still think that he's immensely talented, but I'm as scared as anybody else about the back surgery. I think it's definitely a huge red flag.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in terms of upside. The guy has the qualities to be a number 1 corner in the NFL. Again, injuries scare me. Landon Dickerson's another one from Alabama. The guy's had injuries every single season. It's just a little bit concerning to me. And I like healthy guys. Like availability is the best ability, and I stick by that because think about Leonard Williams. A lot of people give him a lot of smack, but if we didn't have Leonard Williams last year, I don't think you guys understand how bad you probably do understand how bad our defense would have been without him. He draws so much attention. He opens it up for the other guys. We ranked 12th in sacks last year, and he had a quarter of them. So, that should put it into perspective. And he has 62 total pressures, which was like 3rd in the NFL, and interior pass rushers, like ridiculous. He was half of our defense, and really opened it up for the secondary to lock it down for the most part. But before we wrap up here, Anthony, I know you got one more guy, JOK out of Notre Dame. I know you don't think he's a scheme fit for the Giants. We'll talk about it for a second. I love JOK as a prospect. He's a little undersized, so he might get bullied in the run game every now and then. But he has the capabilities of being an elite cover linebacker, which might fare well for the Giants. But the Giants, with those 2 middle linebackers in that 3-4 scheme, they have like a weak side guy. I don't necessarily think he is going to be filling gaps and playing hard run style defending. If they needed a guy who could cover tight ends, cover running backs very, very nicely, JOK is the man to do it. I think he is going to thrive in that area, but at the same time, we've talked about this before, he might even make the transition back to strong safety, because Anthony made a really, really great comparison a couple episodes ago with him and Jamal Adams. And even Jabril Peppers. JOK reminds me of actually Jabril Peppers a lot too. He's very, very good in coverage. He can play the run, but I don't want him playing run-stopping linebacker and filling those gaps. He doesn't have the biggest body. So that's I can see where you're coming from, and the Giants should stay away from him, because they already have that type of player.
Right, you mentioned that he wouldn't be that guy who can withstand the bullying of a run game and be a good run defender. I think that's what Patrick Graham looks for in his linebackers, in his off-ball linebackers in the scheme. I think that JOK is a phenomenal talent. I did compare him to Jamal Adams. I think he goes to a team and he ends up playing the Jamal Adams role. The Giants don't need another guy to play the Jamal Adams role. That's how I feel personally. We have Xavier Mckinney and Jabril Peppers. Those are 2 guys who are very capable of playing that role in a defense. Obviously not to Jamal Adams' level, but they play that defensive role. Jabril Peppers gets in the box and plays linebacker when there's passing situations. He's not a great run defender when, it's a stacked box. But in the nickel defense, he plays that inside middle linebacker, that nickel linebacker, and he plays coverage on tight ends, and he's a decent run defender, so he can get it done from there. I don't think the Giants necessarily need another player that does that same role. Okay, that's JOK to me. So, for me personally, if the Giants, let's say they trade back to around pick 20 in the draft, okay, and they gain an extra 2nd and 3rd round pick, and it's awesome, and we're all celebrating. At 20, I don't want them to go with JOK. Okay, I just don't think that he fits what the Giants need and doesn't fit the Giants scheme, because he's not the linebacker that Patrick Graham likes. I would rather them take Zaven Collins out of Tulsa in that situation. I think that he's a better scheme fit for the Giants. So JOK, while I think he's a phenomenal talent, I think he goes to a team maybe like the Jets. I know they have a pick in that mid-20s range. If he goes there, maybe even to the Oakland Raiders, I think. That's another team that might know how to use him. Those teams could benefit from having a Jamal Adams prototype player, right? That archetype of player, that's what those teams need. That's what those teams are looking for from their linebacker/safety hybrid. I don't think the Giants are looking for that. So I think for me personally, if we're picking in that 20-something range from a trade down, I want them to stay away from JOK, but not because I don't think he's a great player. I think he's a phenomenal talent, and I think that he will have a good NFL career depending on where he gets drafted to. A lot of players are very dependent on where they end up being drafted. We see players have 4-year careers with a team, sign somewhere else, completely break out after being pretty stagnant and mediocre with their first team because they weren't drafted to the right situation or right scheme. I think with JOK, His career is going to be very dependent on where he ends up playing and in what scheme he ends up playing. And I don't think that the Giants are where he should go, and I don't think they're the scheme that he should be playing in. Again, I think we have the player who plays that role with Gibral Peppers. So that's how I feel about JOK. I think he's a phenomenal talent. I think he has all-pro potential in the NFL. Just don't think that he reaches that potential playing with the Giants, who already have a stacked group of safeties who play the role that we would want him to play.
Yep, so there you have it. There's your breakdown for JOK and why he might not be a fit with Big Blue. But I don't think the Giants are going to go with any of these guys personally, which is why, you know, we're ranking them as players that we should stay away from. And I think that we're going to see that, you know, reflecting the draft. Coming up in 10 days, we'll do a draft stream the entire time. Anthony, what do you got?
I think that Russo might end up with the Giants, and I'm very afraid of it. I think that he actually is a dark horse to go at 11 to the Giants. I know that that sounds really scary to a lot of people because I'm very scared of it. But I just think that, I don't know, he looks like a player that Dave Gettleman would like a lot. I know Joe Judge is in town, so maybe that would change things. But the fact that Mark Ross is still, I know that he still has connections to the Giants front office. He still talks to people. He was there with Kevin Abrams forever. I know he talks to him. So the fact that he just mocked them taking Gregory Russo at 11 really scares me. So I think that they are going to stay away from the other guys that we said, but I just have this fear about Gregory Russo. But I'm hoping that they just wait till round 2 and see if he falls there if they want to take him.
I agree. I think if anything, they would go Ojulari, and even then it would be a reach. I think trading back to like the 15 range of the Patriots, if they could swing it, would be ideal. But guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video talking about a couple guys we don't think the Giants should target in the draft. Always a good time. 10 days away. We have an awesome stream set up for draft day. We'll be doing it the whole night for the first round. And then the next day as well for the next couple rounds to see who the Giants land. Pretty excited about that. Really excited to see who we get. It's been a long time coming. I'm done with the mock drafts. I'm done with the BS. I'm ready for football. And I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to subscribe below on YouTube and turn on notifications for Apple and Spotify. And we'll catch you guys on the next video.